Brilliant stuff. Right, excellent. Right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our repeat offenders. There's a number of people I recognise have been to a number of these sessions so far, and welcome to you if this is your first chance to listen into the call. So today we're going to be talking about something called daily management and its importance in the lean journey. But before we kick off on that, a little bit of introduction of myself. My name's Chaz Goldring. I worked for 30 plus years. So looking at that experience, I was over 10% of the experience that Jill was mentioning there. I can't believe that's right, given the age structure of some of the other guys who are in the technical team. But anyway, 30 odd years working for British Steel in its various guises. Steeped in operational management, order progressing, customer service, stock and contract management. I am indeed a Master Black Belt, accredited with the British Quality Foundation. I have a number of, I've left British Steel and I've managed to pick up a number of companies, which I always think is particularly clever. And I was a member of the Tata Business Excellence team for a number of years, where I learnt the names behind a lot of these skills. In reality, I've been using them for a lot of my working life, and I guess you guys will probably be in exactly the same boat. The photograph on the top right-hand one was actually taken about 25 years ago, and that was before we were even trained in continuous improvement. It was just something that worked well for us at that time. And that's a picture of myself presenting to the then director of supply chain at what was Chorus in those days. Okay, so that's an introduction to myself. Daily management. So those of us who listened into the 5S presentation last month, daily management and 5S are actually intertwined in my mind. They are the foundation bedrock of all things in improvement and then transformation. And they involve many of the same kind of tech tools and techniques that we discussed last month. So you'll get visual management, standard operating procedures, confirmation, control plans are all elements of daily management, as indeed they are all elements of 5S. And quite often in your journey towards lean, you'll involve both all this stuff, even if you're just progressing on a journey in 5S. But there are absolute building blocks, which I'll explain in some detail as we go through the presentation. The building blocks to your lean activities, your Lean Six Sigma, your Kaizen projects, your continuous improvement, whatever your A3 thinking, whatever you are doing in terms of driving improvement in your business. If you haven't got the building blocks owned and driven by the shop floor, then the likelihood is those improvement projects will fail. And I've, over my career, found countless times where we have always gone for those kind of sexy subjects around projects and forgotten about the basics. And we've ended up with failure. And because we end up with failure, you end up that you don't get a transformation in your company, and everyone turns around and says, well, lean's a bit of a waste of time. It's actually, in reality, it's because we haven't got those building blocks in place. So what is daily management? Lovely little graphic, looks complicated at first sight, but it's fairly relatively simple. Key thing about daily management, it is about stabilizing your process and then building standards to allow continuous improvement. So the chart at the bottom, the vertical axis is all about performance. The horizontal axis is about time. And over time, if you look at the left-hand side of the graphic, over time, we have instability in your process. We have different people coming to work. We have different things going wrong. We have different occasions that happen around us, circumstances happen around us that make your process unstable. And what daily management is trying to do is stabilize that. So whichever shift comes out, whichever operation comes out, whatever time of day, year, or whatever is around, we have a stable process. So you can virtually guarantee what you're producing all the time. And then that leads on to continuous improvement driven by some techniques such as A3 thinking, Lean Six Sigma, 8D, whatever, takes your fancy. and ultimately leads through to breakthrough, and you bring in something like CapEx or new product development or whatever. But that is an explanation. That's where daily management fits in. It's about stabilizing the process to allow you to build standards to allow continuous improvement. And a little further about what daily management is all about. First off, it is driven by you as leaders. You need to go out there, you need to drive it. It is not something that you can do by just handing over to people. It is you that has to actually drive that out in the workplace. But it is owned by everybody. If you don't involve your workforce, you're likely to fail with it. I've seen umpteen times where the leadership team decide on the key measures. They agree them in some ivory tower, and then they force it on the operators. And the operators sit there and say, well, you know, what does this mean to us? Why are we doing it this way? For effective implementation of daily management, you need to involve everybody in it to make sure that they absolutely own it. The other key thing about daily management, I mean, I've been in organizations in the previous world where I think they developed 15 steps to daily management, which was overly complicated. Believe me, by step 4, by step 5, it was like, oh, you know, why the heck are we doing this kind of thing? So what I've done is I've distilled it down into 4 key steps. Believe me, there's a lot of work involved in them. We haven't got time this morning to go into that kind of detail, but there are 4 key steps. The first one is actually understanding and agreeing what your key measures are and visualizing them. Okay, and typically you would do that in a war room or at the production floor. You got your key measures, we then go out and we do the job. So that involves some form of standard work. The standard work plus other elements of control are reflected in your control plan. This is your Bible that tells you how you are doing the work. And then the 4th element of daily management is actually confirming that you're doing the work and you're actually getting things done in the right way. And I've distilled it down. There are lots of elements within each one of those 4, but those are your key 4 big steps that you need to take. And it's a constant PDCA. So you've got your confirmation, you go back to the beginning and check that your key measures haven't changed. Okay. The other thing about daily management is a bit of a misnomer in the name. You know, traditionally we'll talk about manufacturing. It's actually, in reality, it's routine management. I have been to very successful daily management meetings, which actually occurred on a monthly basis, particularly in places like HR, which might have a recruitment process over a period of 3 or 4 months in the year where they're recruiting people, and their meetings are weekly. But there's still some form of daily management where you have these routines in place to ensure that you're actually delivering the process in the right way, in a stable way, to actually bring people into your company. So what's the first step? First step is all about agreeing your key measures. Where do you get those key measures from? 2 places. The first place, most importantly, is the voice of the customer. It's about listening to what your customers want from you. Do they want round widgets or do they want square widgets? The other key thing about voice of the customer is it's not just about your ultimate external customer, but it's also about your internal customers as well. Ideally, what you should be doing is starting with that external customer and working your way back through the supply chain to your point in the process, so you can understand exactly what you need to do with your process to deliver the right thing for the next point in the process to enable them to deliver it to the final customer. So that's the first thing. Agree what are your key measures are. The second element is obvious. It's your process itself. What drives your process? How does your process tick? Okay, and following that, and as I said before, no time this morning to get into that kind of detail, but once you've gone through a number of different tools and techniques to actually identify what those measures are, you'll end up with a whole series of different measures. The next element of it is visualizing them. So how do we do that? Well, typically, classically in the lean world, we visualize them using some kind of whiteboard like this. So here's one which is actually taken from a Coke ovens, highly detailed in terms of the process metrics around how they're going to deliver the right kind of quality Coke to the blast furnaces, and in this case it was Scunthorpe. So typically whiteboards, but there is no reason why you can't actually do a little bit of mixing with electronics. So there's a lot of firms these days who will advertise and try and sell electronic visual management. Okay, and I think there's a time and place for that. Be careful though, guys, because they can quite often with IT, you over elaborate, you over complicate. Whiteboards, it's all about actually getting engagement from the troops. And indeed, these boards on the right, each individual board is owned probably by a team leader or a shift manager. Okay, and it's their board. They've designed it, they own it, and they then report back at it during your meetings. And talking about the operators themselves, the visualization of your KPIs, the visualization of your key measures goes right down to the shop floor. So this is an example of a shop blaster daily management board. It's apologies for the fact it's a little bit out of focus, but the lighting in this particular shed was quite difficult. But on the left-hand side is the actual targetry, the targets, the key targets that were expected in terms of that shop blaster, and the operator is then updating exactly where they are and what key problems and key issues that they get with respect to that particular blaster. And in between, we have Happy Harry here. Lovely guy, this guy called Lee Robson, who works on Teesside. This is his visual board. It's his team leader board. It's used for shift handover, and it is used for communicating with the rest of his shift. And you can't quite make him out, but he's grinning merrily there because he finds it absolutely fantastic, and it actually cuts out a lot of the time of operating his particular area of operation. So there we go. We visualize the information. The second element of daily management is all about standard works, ensuring operational consistency, because we work to an agreed standard way of working so that every time we work in the same way, irrespective of differences between people, to produce the same quality, the same delivery, and the same cost levels. The other thing about standard work is it's all about, it's that foundation which enables you to audit it and actually drive improvement. Okay, and here we are. Here's a bit of a reasoning around that. So if you take an example of three lovely young people, you've got person B, person A, person C. I really should give these guys names, but anyway, they are working. Again, if you look at the vertical axis, that's about performance. The bottom axis is all about time. They are working to different levels of performance. Okay, person B, absolutely fantastic, is working the best. Then he's followed by person A, and he's followed by person C. What a standard work does is it takes the best way of operating, it takes all the best elements of what person B, A, and C are doing and locks it in using a standard operating procedure. And what you'll find by doing that, and because you're out there and you're questioning and you're getting everyone's best method of operation into place, you actually improve the performance of your workplace. Then what we do is we drive improvement using plan, do, check, act. We improve the way we operate. We then lock it in by creating a revised or new standard operating procedure. And then we continually drive improvement. We have another improvement campaign. We again lock it in with standard operating procedures, and then we again drive improvement. The difficulty is if you don't have those door stops, which are your standard operating procedures, the likelihood is over time, your improvement will worsen. Okay, and it'll just go back to where we were in the first place. So that's standard work. And here's a good example of one, a bit of the ultimate, I have to say. But what you're going to be careful with standard work is they really need to be a mixture of different ways of visualizing information to your operators. So in this particular case, it is a mix of visual, of photographs, and absolutely key information written down. And on top of that, there's additional information. So you see red, wear gloves when in close. Well, that is a key safety measure for that particular element of the job. The white one, using a wire brush. So the operator knows he requires a wire brush at that element. And if you want to put additional information in, We've got the yellow, scrap must be cut shorter, etc., etc., etc. So that is a visual example of a standard operating procedure that works pretty well and is used and is still being used in a distribution centre not too far away from where I live on Teesside. Okay, so that's your standard work. Standard work, though, is only part of the journey. And what you've got to remember is that it always starts with safety. What do I mean by that? Well, you take an operation, you go out and you do a proper comprehensive risk assessment of that operation. You understand what the key safety steps are, and then you incorporate them in step 2 in terms of your standard work. You then go out. Step 3 is you check competence, you check and you make sure people are trained, and then we go on to step 4, which is all about confirmation. And before we move on to confirmation, this is it. You know, I'm going to stress this, but this is not easy, guys. This is difficult. This is quite time consuming. But at the end of the day, if you want stability in your organization, then you have to go through this kind of work. So standard work is just one element of control, and the control plan, so this is the third element of daily management, contains all the control mechanisms, and there's a hierarchy of control. And you'll notice standard work actually is at the bottom. It is the least best, if you see what I mean. What's not included there is the knowledge and experience of operators, because there's a big danger there. If you're dependent on the knowledge of your people to carry out the job, you are in big risk when they leave the company. Okay, and you'll end up, as we did in my previous businesses, not being able to do things because we've lost key experience. But standard work, which collects all that knowledge and experience, is actually the least best. Something like statistical process control or automation or fail-safe error-proofing mechanisms are much, much better. So you need to decide in terms of your process exactly what controls and additional controls you need to put in place. And we collect them all together in something called a control plan. Simple format, process steps to your process down the left-hand side. We identify what needs controlling, and then we put the controls. And things like failure mode effects analysis link into this and actually help you improve the control that you have over your process. The last element of daily management is confirmation. So this is where you go out and you check that people are working to the correct standards. Because if you don't, what happens is operators will start to miss critical steps. They'll do that because there could well be a lack of training. There could be tiredness. It could be it's a complicated step. It could be it's an element of cleaning that they don't really understand why they're doing it. Confirmation is absolutely critical to ensure that things are being done time after time in the correct standard way. And this can be done by in a layered way by getting your team leaders to check, getting your shift managers to check, getting your operation managers to check, and getting your leaders to check. And you end up with a layer of confirmation that drives the use of standards. It's quite important to probably link that in with your morning meeting process. The best examples of a confirmation I've ever come across are where the guys have a morning meeting and then they go out and they confirm an element of the plant. And that confirmation is not just about standard work. It can be about 5S. It can be about key safety issues that they've got at the time, but it's part of their process. And they then go off onto their normal day jobs. So confirmation, let's just have a look at a few examples of that. Confirmation, there's the standard one, which is your morning meeting process. So you've got a lovely bunch of guys there all looking at their visual boards, but also it can be at the shop floor. This is an example of a confirmation sheet which lists on the left-hand sides how to build a role set in heavy industry, but it could be a comms team. It could be a HR job. It could be a list of how do we recruit a graduate? Okay, that left-hand list. And what the guys are doing, and in this case, it's a team leader, he is ticking and dating when they have carried out those particular aspects of their job. Okay, that is then further backed up by confirmation checklists at where the roles are actually built into the mill itself. And the conference, so you've got a team leader doing that, but then on top of that, you've got the manager and the operational manager. So the two guys who are closest to the board there, they are the management team for that particular plant, and they are confirming that the team leader is actually working to the correct standard. Why is that important? Because the team leader needs to see evidence that you care. If you're not doing that, sooner or later you'll begin to think, well, why am I filling in this board if my management team don't care about it? And indeed, this did happen with this particular board. The guy in the middle left the company. Okay, the guy on the left moved to a different job. And over time, the team leaders stopped updating it until at a point where I actually physically went down, saw this happening, and I raised it, and it got revamped. But it's very easy for it to start to go into disrepute if you haven't got that leadership. Remember what I said right at the beginning, it is leadership driven. Okay, so that's confirmation. So, and that is a very, very rough, a very, very quick plow through a subject that is got a lot of complications within it. And indeed, the training that Jill mentioned early on, we go into much greater detail onto how to actually implement your daily management routines within your particular company. So I'll finish without any more ado. I'll finish there because I've been waffling on now for 40 odd minutes. Are there any questions?